Howdy everyone. Now, it's not often that manufacturers put out shift or tilt-shift lenses nowadays, so it's fun for me to be checking out this new offering from Venus Optics. Their Laowa 15mm f4.5 shift lens. It's a totally manual, full-frame lens for digital SLR cameras, although the version you see here is a special one for Nikon's Z mount mirrorless cameras with a built-in adapter at the back, making it a little longer than one of their models for digital SLRs. It costs about $1,200 in the US or £1,200 in the UK. Sounds like a lot of money, but that's about half the price of Canon's 17mm tilt-shift lens and only a third of the price of Nikon's 19mm tilt-shift lens, although this Laowa option does not feature a tilt function. I'd like to thank Venus Optics for providing this lens for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. Many of you will already know what a shift lens is by now, but here's a recap just in case. The shift function here, up to 11mm on this lens, enables you to correct your perspective for architecture photography or any other kind of photography where keeping straight lines straight is important. Yes, you can do this to your pictures in editing software too, but that will degrade your final image quality quite a bit, and there's nothing quite like getting it right when you're there in a field. You can also rotate this lens so that it shifts from left to right or any angle in between. And another neat trick is that the shift function can be used to make easily stitchable panorama images. Just shift the lens all the way to the left, taking a shot, and then to the right, taking another shot, making sure to keep the exposure the same by shooting in manual mode, then stitch them together in editing for a high resolution panorama. Neat. You can do some other fun things too, like appearing in each picture in a different position before stitching them together, so the shift function is pretty useful for architecture or landscape photography, especially considering this lens is extremely wide angle of 15mm. As I've already mentioned, unlike its competitors, this lens does not feature a tilt function. Now that's mostly used for professional product photography, which is hardly a priority on an ultra-wide angle 15mm lens, so Venus Optics just about get away with their decision there, I think. When it comes to build quality, this lens is excellent. It's very solid, very metallic, and easy to use. It's also far smaller than competing tilt-shift lenses that are on the market, which are generally enormous. It's based on a metal lens mount which doesn't have a weather sealing gasket around it. At the rear come the controls for the shift mechanic, and they're well designed. The shift mechanism can be locked in place with a little metal knob, and a control ring lets you adjust the shift action very precisely. Just behind that is a switch which lets you rotate the shift mechanism, locking it in place every 15 degrees. Sandwiched between the shift control ring and the focus ring comes a rather narrow aperture control ring which clicks into place every f-stop. The aperture mechanism has 5 straight cut iris blades, which helps you to get some pretty awesome sun stars. I'll show you that a bit later. And in front of that ring comes a focus ring with a hyperfocal distance scale, which turns incredibly smoothly and slightly heavily and is nice and precise. At the very front we get a particularly bulbous front glass element, which will obviously preclude you from using filters. It comes with a special lens hood made of metal, which snaps into place nice and tightly. Overall, it's a well-built, tough little manual focus lens, and as I mentioned, it's much smaller than a tilt-shift lens. The control dials can be a little fiddly to use, all bunched up at the front there, but it's no problem if you use it with care. Now, onto image quality. I'm testing it on my Nikon Z7 with its full-frame 45 megapixel sensor. Firstly, I'm using the lens normally, unshifted. In the middle of the image at f4.5, sharpness is excellent with good contrast. The image corners look very good too, offering a decent amount of resolution. Stop down to f5.6 for a slight improvement, and f8 and f11 offer further tiny improvements. The lens begins to soften a little at f16, as you can see from the effect of diffraction. Overall though, it's an impressive performance when it's not shifted. Now let's shift the lens all the way up and see what happens. In the middle of the image at f4.5, picture quality is soft with lower contrast and clear astigmatism. There's more horizontal resolution than vertical, which is kind of what you'd expect to see actually. This is what you can typically expect from a shift lens, to be honest, even a more expensive one. In the corner that's been stretched the least, we still see softness, but a bit more contrast. The corner that's been stretched the most, surprisingly, seems to offer the best area of image quality here, but it's fairly dark, as you might expect. Stop down to f5.6 and things are just a little clearer in that corner, and the corner that's been stretched the least sees a truly fantastic improvement. The middle of the image sees a bit more clarity now, although things are still a little fuzzy there. Stop down to f8 and the middle looks fairly good, albeit with a little colour fringing. The least stretched corner is still excellent. The most stretched corner now looks excellent too. At f11, the corners remain as sharp as ever now, but the middle of the image sees another improvement, looking very good now. Wow, what a rollercoaster ride that was. Unsurprisingly, as we've seen, shifting the lens brings in a considerable penalty for image quality. It is important to note, once again, that even the best shift lenses show these kind of image quality problems when fully shifted. You should avoid shifting this lens and shooting at f4.5 at all costs, but stop down to f5.6 for a big improvement in image quality, and as you stop down to f8 or f11, image quality becomes excellent throughout the entire picture frame. Now let's take a look at distortion and vignetting. When the lens is unshifted, we are treated to almost no distortion and only slightly dark corners at f4.5. Stop down to f5.6 and they brighten up again. Now let's shift the lens. We notice a slight stretching to the distortion pattern now, but it's nowhere near as bad as I expected. It's still mostly under control. There's a lot of darkness in the top of the image though, where the image has been stretched the most. Stop down to f5.6, f8 or f11 to see that slowly get pushed higher up, but it'll always be there, at least just a little. So a very good result for distortion, but its vignetting is a bit heavy. Now let's take a look at close-up image quality. This thing can focus down to a fantastically close 20 centimeters. Close-up image quality at the maximum aperture of f4.5 is softer than before, but still quite good. Stop down to f5.6 and contrast is a little better, and stop down to f8 for some very good sharpness close up. Now let's take a look at how the lens works against bright lights. Its very bulbous front glass element here is surely setting it at a serious advantage. At f4.5 we see a fair bit of glaring and flaring popping up even when bright lights are not completely in the picture frame, but if you stop down to f5.6 a lot of that does go away. Now let's take a look at chroma levels. When it's unshifted, the lens shows almost no chroma smearing, straight from f4.5. Let's shift the lens now, and I'm looking at the least stretched corner here. At f4.5 we see some slight chroma smearing and a touch of purple fringing on bright points of light, but nothing too dramatic. Stop down to f5.6 and it's largely gone away to be replaced by some rather snazzy sun stars, and if you stop down to f8 then they look even better. You get those sun stars when the lens is unshifted too. Nice. And finally, bokeh. Unless you're getting very close to your subject, then background separation is a bit of a moot point here, but generally, out of focus backgrounds are rendered very softly by the lens. Overall, well, testing this lens out was pretty exciting, as well as time consuming. You could summarize it by saying that this is a very good ultra-wide-angle lens when used conventionally, with good image quality and a nice close focus distance. When shifted, you get severe image quality problems at the widest apertures, which clean up fairly quickly as you stop the lens down, and if you stop down to f11, then the lens offers excellent image quality when shifted, including low distortion. So, if you bear that in mind, it's really quite capable and a good choice for architecture photography, both indoors and outdoors. Another advantage is that it costs far less than the tilt shift lenses that Canon and Nikon offer, although obviously the lack of a tilt function somewhat accounts for that price difference. A comparison video is coming, but its image quality I think is broadly comparable with the other two. We'll have to see, but if you're on the market for a shift lens, then this model is certainly worth consideration, so it does come recommended. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's my pleasure to put these reviews together for everyone. If you find them helpful, then please feel free to check out my Patreon page, where you can find all kinds of exclusive content and videos and sneak previews for anyone who'd like to support the channel for only $3 a month. It's not just about increasing my personal beer fund, it makes a real difference to keeping these tests going. See you again soon.